Okay, I think I found the right spot. Um, we're on session 3. Motion caught his eye, and he turned to find a creature standing wide-eyed by the ornate wardrobe. It was about half his height, including the points of its ears. The green skin promised perfect invisibility in a swamp or somewhere else suitably mucky. Here it clashed terribly with the decor in the hastily tailored livery, which had clearly been intended for someone larger. It shifted nervously from foot to foot, staring at its claws. Goblin, his mind helpfully supplied. Your new valet, the steward said. There was something in his tone that promised a larger story there. His name is, Gribeetle, was it? The little, the little creature muttered into its claws, only partially comprehensible in his trembling. Master Saricio, mumbled Dread Lord Garavax. Names! He could have kissed the goblin, but he forced himself not to react. Serico, remind me, what happened to the last one? He tried desperately to make the question sound casual and lazy. You burned him alive for crushing the pile on your favorite robe. Serico answered, his tongue flicked out to moisten his lips as his gaze slid over to enjoy Garabeetle's reaction. The young goblin swallowed hard, clearly taking it as a warning. Oh, yes. He managed to choke out, hoping his sudden nausea wasn't too obvious. Had the old captain of the guard met a similar fate? How did he possibly keep the castle running if he kept executing the staff? I hope a repetition will not be necessary. Welcome to the team, young Gurbeetle. There was some kind of trick to rolling the R's, which he couldn't quite figure out. The goblin valet nodded frantically. He wondered how old Garabeetle was. He couldn't remember why he knew that an adult goblin was supposed to look like, but he knew this one was composed of even more elbows than he would be at full growth. A teenager, or whatever their equivalent would be. Probably still in the stage where he was eating everything in sight. He had a sudden flash of a tantalizing memory of wolfing down an entire stale loaf of bread in his youth, and not really caring that it was stale, and then it was gone again and leaving just the memory of a memory behind. He wished them both gone so he could chase it. But they stood there expectantly. Well, Garabeetle, I have a princess to visit, but this certainly won't do. He held up the tattered sleeves. He had his doubts about the suitability of the creature for the job, but he didn't know where his own clothes were, so it was at least worth a try. Serico hovered. Did the man not have anything better to do? You may go, he said, making a motion that came out somewhat less like a lordly dismissal and more like a shoo. He'd have to practice, in private. Serico took himself out, at least, leaving him trapped in a room with a valet who believed that he was one wrong step away from incineration. It was surprisingly awkward. The goblin busied himself with the wardrobe. What was he supposed to be doing while he waited? The only mercy was the valet didn't know either. He unbolted the shutters and threw them open. The hinges squealed, unaccustomed to the mistreatment. The warm rays of the setting sun poured in, making the decor look all the more tawdry. The bedroom lay in the corner of a small castle, not large, although he couldn't bring the images of any others to mind for comparison. If it boasted towers, they lay behind him. From what he could see, it seemed to be a squat keep of dark gray stone with a modest courtyard surrounded by a stout wall. The entire thing perched on a hill barely large enough to contain it, encircled by a stagnant moat. The narrow path wound down to a small, squalid village below. The houses had once been quaint enough, but had clearly fallen on hard times. He found no people about, just a few stray goats. Farther out, he could see tiny figures bent over fields, working to beat the end of the daylight. He felt a stab of disappointment, which he knew was irrational. He was a wizard of enough power to control his own keep and his own little town of serfs. But it was a somewhat pathetic town. Not much to be proud of. Still, couldn't they at least try to keep the place neater? He supposed it was too much to wish for a really dramatic lair with craggy mountains and caves, or a proper moat at least. If he was going to fail at ominous, although he might have been nice to at least achieve picturesque, maybe he could terrorize them into a beautification project. Still, he had information, a lot more information than an hour ago. He had a name, Dreadlord Garavax. Surely that couldn't be his original name, of course. No mother would name their baby Garavax, would she? He winced. Of course, someone who thought those bedposts were a good idea would choose the name Garavax. He tried to think of himself as a Garavax, and just couldn't wrap his mind around it. Gav, maybe? It's supposed to be Gavarax, and I'm saying it wrong. Not Garavax, Gavarax. Gav. We'll try that going forward. He could live with Gav, not that he had anyone to call him Gav. Garabeetle presented him with a set of robes, not even trying to mumble this time or make eye contact. Appropriately deferential, he supposed. What his former self would have wanted. He wasn't sure he liked it. How did the goblin come to work here, he wondered suddenly. Did he have parents? Someone to regret the risk their precious child was exposed to? Someone to eagerly embrace the opportunity? Did Gav himself have parents? The thought produced a faint throb of pain, like probing a wound that had long since scarred over. Was he himself an orphan? How did someone decide to go down the path of darkness? Thoughts for later, when he was wearing clothes. We're going to stop there because it's a good stopping spot, and we'll pick up again in a moment, I think.